spoke to Bob Quinn, you know Bob Quinn?
Yeah, I know Bob.
And
yeah.
Jeannie Strauss.
Right.
And they said, I wrote a lot of technical papers in my engineering career. And they read a little of it. And I wrote some magazine articles. And so they said, yeah. So I started writing. I wrote over 500 articles for them.
Wow.
They were going. Greetings, and welcome to Book Talk. My name is Bill Lemansky, and this month we'll be discussing a very interesting and very startling book in some regards called Solved: Curing Your Medical Insurance Problems, co-authored by Adria Goldman Gross, who we're fortunate in having with us this morning, and Dr. Douglas Winslow Cooper. The book is very interesting and very informative in that it covers many of the arcane, what I consider very arcane and confusing details in the medical industry, which we're all faced with throughout our lives. I find medical insurance, as an example, just as perhaps Byzantine as the tax code, perhaps even more so. Its importance to us in our lives cannot be overstated. For example, I'd like to read a brief segment of the book to you that, to me, was an eye-opener. According to studies, 80% of medical bills contain fees that are incorrect, often inflated to favor the practitioner. Now, that's a remarkable statement. And if you just consider how many people are either overpaying or not receiving the coverage that they deserve in our arcane medical system. I'd like to read a little bit of the thesis, or what I found to be the theme or thesis of the book. This is written by Adria. Through personal reflection and in-depth analysis, the authors share detailed tips on how readers can spot overcharges by their doctors or hospitals, underpayments by their health plans, and incorrect denials by their insurance. My decades of experience with medical practice, billing, and insurance claim handling rudely educated me about the high frequency of erroneous billing and mistaken denial of medical insurance coverage claims. I became determined to write and speak on behalf of the mistreated and the bilked, using the experience I had obtained in my decades in the medical billing and insurance fields. Well, Adria, reading that, it's quite frightening what we're dealing with, and we don't even know it half the time. If 80% of us are getting bilked or undercovered in the medical insurance business. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
It's my pleasure. At the beginning of the book, you mention in your early life a somewhat serious illness that you've had for a number of years. I'd like you to, if you can, touch on that, but also, is that what really introduced you to medical care, or the seriousness, a concern over receiving medical care? Tell us a little about that.
I have a really interesting story. We're here in Monroe, and I was born in Port Jervis, New York, in Orange County. I was taking horseback riding lessons when I was 11 and a half years old, and I was in Hebrew school, Temple Beth El in Port Jervis. One day, we're sitting there, and we had a map of Israel. I had to write down the cities on the map. And all of a sudden, this feeling came over me where I just felt so sick. I was nauseous. And I said to the rabbi, I said, I'm not feeling well. Can I please go down the hall? And he was like going back and forth, like, you're trying to get out of this test, so on and so forth. And finally, he allows a friend of mine to walk me down the hall. She walks me down the hall. I want to tell you something else about her. She walks me down the hall. I sat in a chair and went into a coma.
Hello.
Right there in our synagogue. The interesting thing is what I'm about to tell you. She wound up becoming a nurse, and her husband is a neurologist. But I walked down the hall, sat in a chair, went into a coma. Shockingly, I was able to walk. I heard the story afterwards because I was totally unconscious. I was able to walk. My dad took me out to the car, and he started driving me home, and he realized that I'm not responding to him. There's got to be something wrong. So he turns around and takes me to the hospital in Port Jervis, which at the time was called St. Francis, and now it's Bon Secours. It's a Catholic hospital, but this is the amazing thing. I'm coming out of the coma about 10 hours later. I'm laying there.
10 hours? You were in a coma?
Yeah, 10 hours, right.
Wow.
And I'm laying there in this hospital bed. And as I'm laying there, and I open my eyes, all of a sudden, straight ahead, I see this cross on the wall, thinking, where am I, in heaven?
Oh, gee. Now, what actually precipitated the coma?
So this is what happened. I was in Port Jervis Hospital for about a week. But the doctor, who happened to live across the street from me, he was the family doctor, he said to my mom, he said, I have a feeling that this is encephalitis. It's an inflammation of the brain. I then was sent to New York University Hospital. I was in Port Jervis for a week, and then I went to New York University Hospital, and I saw a pediatric neurologist there. First, they thought I had a tumor. There was over the years, I've had 8 spinal taps where they put a needle in the back and they take fluid out. I even had cases where they put fluid in my spine. But he took the fluid out, one of the doctors, and first they went to my mother saying to her that they thought I had a brain tumor.
Oh, wow.
And luckily, my mom was crying, thinking it was going to be the end of me.
Well, that's the probable expectation with encephalitis, is it not?
Encephalitis is an inflammation of the brain.
Right.
Right. So it wasn't a brain tumor. My mom was just crying her eyes out with fear that I was going to die. But instead, it was this inflammation. And what happened after that is due to that insect bite, due to the coma, due to the inflammation in the brain, it left me with brain damage, and I lived with epilepsy for almost 25 years of my life.
Wow.
I used to average 18 seizures a month. At one point, I was taking 32 pills a day, always very druggy. The longest period I ever went without a seizure was 3 months, but I lived from the age of 11 and a half until I was almost 35 years old,
Wow.
having continuous seizures.
Now, how did you recover from that?
Well,
Or I assume you recovered.
and what happened was, I had been on 18 different medications, as I said, like at one point when I was on 32 pills a day, it was like 3 different types of medication where I had to pop all these pills. And finally, I had a left temporal lobectomy. There's all these incredible tests that they do to see what different areas of your brain and how they respond. Like one of the tests that I had before the surgery, they put half the brain to sleep and then the other half. They want to see how each side is working. So if they take out a portion of one side, is the other one going to be able to compensate?
Now, what actually is that procedure you're referring to?
I don't remember the name of it.
Well, you mentioned...
Oh, the brain surgery I had a left temporal lobectomy.
What is that? I'm not sure I could even pronounce that.
So what they do is they check to see if they were to take out a portion of my brain. It was a left temporal, which is in this area. In fact, when they were cutting me open, they used a saw. And when I came out of the surgery, they shaved my head on this side. They used a saw over here. It was like a question mark. I said, Mom, the question mark means is it going to work or not? But I had...
You were unconscious during this, I hope.
No, they have you awake.
Really?
Because, and this is very interesting you ask that question.
Kind of hideous to hear somebody sawing, isn't it, like that?
Well, they had put me to sleep when they were sawing, but I woke up while they were sawing, and I started crying because I felt the pain. And then they just put me right back under again. But after they cut you open and they put neurons on the brain, if you can answer, they can cut. If you can't answer, they can't cut. During that time, I had to be awake. I don't remember a thing. The following day, the person who was in charge of the EEG, the electroencephalogram, she came into my room and said, "Adria, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but the doctors think you're going to be seizure-free."
Wow. And was that correct?
I am so blessed, and I'm so grateful every day, because now I'm seizure-free. It took me about 6 years to get off all the meds. I then went back and took a test for becoming a driver again. I gave up my license, but it's been phenomenal. It's just been phenomenal.
Now, did that long period of tragic years, did that in some way or other get you involved in medical insurance?
So this is the interesting thing that happened. And things just happen. Things they just happen to us. But when I was in college, I was teaching in Arlington, Massachusetts. I was going to school in Cambridge. I walked out of a classroom due to a seizure. 2 weeks later, the Dean of Education calls me into his office and he says, I think you should leave and reapply in 2 years. And I said, wait a minute, I'm a senior. Before I came here, I told you my situation. Seizures were going to be no problem. I said, I walked out of that classroom when I was teaching 4th grade in my student teaching. And now you're telling me that you want me to leave and reapply in 2 years? I said, we're not going to do that. I said, I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 10 years old. Now I can't be a teacher. I later found out, this was before the Disabilities Act, which was nationally provided to us. Prior to that, New York, and I've lived most of my life in New York, well, all my life I've been in New York, except for when I was in college. I went to school in New York, I lived in New York. After college, I found out that New York State would not even allow me to teach, even if I wanted to. New Jersey, it was going to be the same situation.
Because of that illness.
Right, and nobody told me that. And this is before the Disabilities Act. So I told my university, I said, listen, I have to finish up. I've got to get my bachelor's degree. Now I'm a senior, and now you're telling me to leave and reapply? I said, no. I said, you have courses here for counseling. You give masters of social work here. I said, let me get credits to finish up and help straighten out my mind, because here I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 10, and now you're not letting me do that. So they let me finish. I moved back to Port Jervis for 7 months, moved to New York City. I lived in Manhattan for 2 years, lived out in Jackson Heights for 18 years. But after I had the brain surgery, well, first of all, when I came to New York, I worked 10 years at a lingerie company. And then I had the brain surgery in 1989. And right after the brain surgery, the doctor says to me, so, are you going to go back to the garment industry? And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something different. So I applied for this job, which was customer service, with no idea where I was going to be going. I was hired by one of the major insurance companies. They said to me, Adria, you are too experienced and intelligent to do customer service. We want to put you in claims. So here I am working for this insurance company. Within 2 weeks, they taught me how to deny. Within 4 weeks, I became a supervisor of claims.
What type of insurance were you focusing on then?
It was all, it was interesting.
Medical or?
It was travel insurance, which covers medical, which covers trip cancellation, trip interruption, baggage loss, baggage delay. But medical was right there. And now I am dealing with insurance companies, besides this one that I work for. I'm handling all these claims for people throughout the United States, plus I have claims coming from overseas, because here they travel outside the United States, and I'm seeing all the medical bills even from overseas, which was phenomenal because they get charged so much less than we do here in the United States.
Now, what years was that about that you were doing that?
So I had the brain surgery in 89. I had the brain surgery the end of March. That December, I started working for an insurance company. Was
the insurance as convoluted and complex then as it appears to be now?
Well, I'm going to share this story by telling a lot of people. I was recently asked to speak before insurance companies, hospitals, and third-party administrators. It was the first time they were having an advocate come. I was the advocate, and I spoke about this. Here I'm starting my first job in the health insurance industry. I go back to see my neurologist. I had to pay him out of pocket when I went to his office. I handed him $400. Now I'm working for an insurance company. Immediately they insured me. I didn't have to wait. As soon as I was hired, because it's an insurance company, they put me on their plan. Great. I send my bill in for $400, which I already paid to my doctor, and they pay me back $87. I said to him, I'm an employee here. I'm an employee at your insurance company. You're only
So
paying
you
me.
were out of pocket $313.
Right. So then I said to him, I'm an employee, and all you're going to pay me is $87 out of $400? They said, resubmit it, we'll pay you more. Okay. I resubmit it. I get another check. $17.
I don't think it's much different nowadays in many cases.
That's what I mean. And this was back the end of 1989.
Did you challenge that? Or did you let it go?
I couldn't. I was worried even about my job. I'm thinking I might lose my job, right? So now, and this is what I was just flown down to this past October to speak before insurance companies, hospitals, and third-party administrators. And I gave them an example of this. I said, here, I was working for an insurance company. And I send my claim in, and this is all I get back. So I point to them and I said, imagine you, imagine you having a bill where you paid $25,000, $50,000, $75,000, $100,000, and all you're going to get back is 25% of that. I said, how is that going to make you feel? And that's what is going on in my mind right now. There has to be a change. You know, the business that I opened up, I help people who have denied, overcharged, out-of-network, going nowhere claims. I also help people who need pre-authorizations. And it's great when you can see a doctor, but let's say it's an out-of-network doctor, but you're still covered for that doctor. Or let's say you're in the hospital. This is something that happens very frequently. Anesthesiologists, they're out-of-network, so you get this crazy bill in the mail. You know, I just handled a case recently, which was, I think it was $12,000, $14,000. They were paid like $2,000 to $4,000, but they still wanted the difference, and that's a whole long story in itself. But this is the reason why people are having bankruptcy. You know, a lot of doctors don't even want to be part of health insurance companies anymore. The major hospitals in New York City, 50% of the doctors saying, we're out of network, we don't want to be in this. And then people are paying out of pocket.
Yeah.
But even when you have the insurance, even if it winds up being the doctors out of network, you have to negotiate. And then how much of that money is going to come out of your pocket?
Now, you mentioned in the book, which I read, the statistic of 80%.
Right.
How much of that would you estimate is due to incompetence and error, and how much of it is intentional in terms of denying people what reasonably they should receive?
It's interesting.
Any feel for that?
Right. Well, I have to tell you.
Because I know it's so bureaucratic in my dealings with
Right.
with insurance companies, and I just touch on it from my own insurance and my family's. But it's so bureaucratic. I mean,
Right.
the error potential.
Well, you listen.
As a former engineer,
Okay, so
the more hands and the more processes you go for, the error potential and
Right.
the probability increases. So how much do you think is error, and how much would you think is just intentional? In terms
Error
of
is big. Error is big. My cousin lives in Philadelphia. His daughter has this blood work done. And let's say it was a total of 7 different procedure codes.
can you explain a little about the procedure
Okay, a
codes?
procedure code is when you get your bill from a doctor. They usually put it, when it's outpatient, it's on a 1500 form. When you're an inpatient, it's either on a UB04 or UB92. UB92 is mostly for psych. So when you look on the form, it has a 5-digit procedure code. When it comes to blood work, most of them start with the number 8.
Now, that procedure code defines the type of treatment
Right.
you should receive for a particular problem.
Right.
Is that it?
Right. So that number is saying what kind of blood work test that was, what it was for. You know, it could be CBC, it could be vitamins, it could be, calcium, all different types of tests. So my cousin gets the bill. The lab bill itself was, I think, somewhere between $2,200 to $4,000, somewhere in that area. And I look at the bill, and it has it only had maybe 5 to 7 procedure codes, but it had about 25 lines. And on those 25 lines, they kept on putting that same procedure code in again and again and again. And I looked at it, I said to my cousin, there's something wrong here.
You mean erroneously? They kept re-entering it?
Yeah, I don't know why. So I said to him, look, I said, this is what I want you to do. I said, call them up, tell them that you see this multiple times on the bill. Why are you charging this much, even on that line?
Was the cost increased every time they re-entered that procedure
I
code?
don't remember that, but the thing is that the cost itself for that test, usually when you look at your bill, it's jacked up, like what you were reading before. It's jacked up 5, 10, sometimes even 50 times what the reasonable customary charges are for that procedure code. So they jacked up the amount, and then they had multiples of the same procedure code. He called them up, told them what I said to say to them. They wrote off the bill. He didn't have to pay a penny.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Not saying that will always happen, but they realized how much in the wrong they were. Maybe there was fear
Now,
on their
who
side.
decides on the procedure code? So I go to the doctor.
Right.
I need, let's say, blood tests as an example, and there's a code for each type of test, you say.
Right.
Who distinguishes or assigns what code is appropriate for that particular blood test I need?
So that's really
Where
done
does
by
that come from?
Medicare and Medicaid.
Well, how do they know, wherever they are out in the
Well, they
ether?
don't know, because a lot of times there's fraud going on with the bills too. Okay? A lot of times there's even fraud on the bills where it could be incorrect, or they're saying that they did a procedure that was never done.
Well, how could a patient back check on that when they receive their bill? Is the procedure code defined on there?
Yes, it's supposed to be. It normally
Well, how
is.
would you know? I hope there's an explanation
There
with the code
normally
number.
is, right, there normally is an explanation right after that procedure code, when the bill is submitted, it explains right after what that procedure was. Now, thank God, we have some bright people out there who get hold of that bill, and they go, oh my God, this was not done, this was not done, this was not done.
Mhm.
And they will go back to the provider, some will, some will not. Sometimes they have fear, thinking, oh my God, is this doctor going to take care of me if I go make a complaint? But there are situations where those bills were resubmitted correctly, because if they were not, the patient would report them.
I see.
Yeah.
So the moral of that story is when you receive a bill back from the medical carrier, the insurance carrier, you should scrutinize what's on there.
Absolutely. And you're a man, and I've seen this with Medicare bills. Have you ever been for a pregnancy test?
Not that I know of.
Well, there have been bills out there. You're a man, and you had a pregnancy test.
Really? No kidding. Wow. So there's apparently a significant amount of error that goes into this process.
Right.
Now, talk a little about the non-error part of that 80%, where the insurance company is actually playing a game with you by trying to downplay what they may owe for an ailment, intentionally, not erroneously.
I have a case like that right now. It's very interesting. This woman lives in New Jersey, and she went to visit her family in Venezuela. So she goes to Venezuela, and her insurance carrier would cover her out of the country. Fantastic. So she had a group of different bills. The exchange that they used on her payment of May of 2016 was correct. But the exchange that they used on their payment for her other bills, which were paid in November of 2016, were incorrect. They lowered it way down. And now we are appealing this to try and get her more money. But that's what they're doing to her. They're not paying what they should be paying. And they've lowered the exchange. She's getting almost nothing for what she paid.
Now, when you receive your bill, would you recommend, if something looks fishy on it, would you recommend going back to your doctor to verify the legitimacy of what the bill claims or states?
Absolutely. If you feel that there's something incorrect, absolutely. And some people,
Then you could get a professional opinion on it and then call them the insurance company, I would think, and try to
right,
resolve it.
and a doctor normally would be frightened that something's going to happen to him or her if there's a report against them, or they could possibly lose their license for doing anything that's fraud.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if there's an error in there or an error due to the insurance company,
Right.
not the doctor's entry of the data.
Right. And some people are scared because, they're worried. Like, if I go back to my doctor and talk to them about this, are they still going to take care of me?
Well, they shouldn't be, really, right? I
Right.
would think the average doctor should be reasonable and sensitized to that,
Right.
because they deal with these issues all day long,
Right. Right.
Uh,
And look, it could be their own billing department that made an error. Sometimes the billing is done within their office. Sometimes they hire outside billing companies. Over 10 years ago, I opened up a medical billing business. Here I was, I worked for two health insurance companies where either I paid, they taught me, both insurance companies within 2 weeks taught me what to look for to deny, and they taught me how to deny. And there were cases where the claim was denied, and then I would receive a phone call from the CEO's office of that health insurance company saying, Adria, play that claim. And that experience where they overturned it gave me the knowledge. That experience, denying claims, processing claims, owning a medical billing business, all that experience helped me to become an advocate. I opened up MedWise Insurance Advocacy. It was 5 years ago last month. And the medical billing business, MedWise Insurance Billing, MedWise Billing, Inc., that business was open over 10 years ago. So working for insurance companies, owning a medical billing business, and now from all that experience as an advocate, it's been phenomenal. But the problems occur when you hire a billing company and they make errors also. The errors could be done within your office, or they could be done by the billing company, and it does happen.
I know it's difficult to come up with percentages, but my sense is that the insurance companies frequently like to deny or lowball the importance of a procedure in conflict maybe with a doctor's opinion. I think that's quite common, is it not? Or what have you found in that regard? Where the doctor will want to do a procedure and the insurance company will say no.
Well,
Or we don't cover that.
I have a case I'm working on right now, and the woman, her husband has a tumor in his pancreas, and there's going to be a big argument next week about this, because they don't want her to go to the doctors who really specialize in this, who have many, many more years of experience and many more patients having this procedure. That's going to be a fight. And in this case, she works for a very large company, and they're self-insured. She's not going to be able to appeal it to the state for Department of Insurance, Attorney General, or Consumer Affairs. The only way she can appeal it is through Department of Labor. I will call her employer. I am going to call this large group of doctors who are working with her. This is pretty much a national company. The company that her husband works for, who they have the insurance through, the company that's taking care of them medically is also a national company. My last resort is going to be the politicians. Because if we can't get him to go to the best, and if they're not willing to allow her to see the best, that's where I'm going to reach out to. I will be speaking to her again today. I'm really upset. I just think if this was my child, how would I feel? And I will tell the medical professionals exactly that. I will tell her employer that. Because she has a right to see the best. And it just so happens they are part of her medical group, but they're in another territory, and now they don't want to send her to the other territory. Believe you me, I will fight for her.
You mentioned politicians. That's an interesting topic in terms of discussing medical insurance and medical procedures. The confusion of medical insurance to begin with, I believe, has always been there. But now it's heightened because we have the Affordable Care Act on the one hand, which has its own problems and controversies. And now we have a new really political regime in Washington that wants to overturn that and implement something else. What is your opinion on the Affordable Care Act,
All right.
euphemistically known as Obamacare?
All right, I'm going to tell you the advantages. The first thing that I was so thrilled about was now everybody can have insurance. Prior to this, there were a lot of people out there that could not get insurance at all. That's number one. Number two, no more pre-existing exclusions. That was phenomenal. Number three, a lot of the companies out there would have a very limited amount of coverage. They might have your lifetime, like even where I worked for an insurance company, my lifetime, I remember when I first worked for the first insurance company, my lifetime was $1 million. Okay? Then I remember later on it went to $2 million. With the ACA, there's no limit. So those are the three major things. Now, I have to tell you this. I'm working on a case right now where this woman needed a short-term policy because, you can't get your insurance until the beginning of the year. That's the way it's set up.
When the window's open, as they
Right.
say, right?
So she had issues, and a lot of people have issues with this because you might send your money into the insurance company, your premium, but they might not be receiving it. It might be not input correctly, and all of a sudden, oh, now I don't have insurance because I didn't pay my premium, but I did pay my premium, and here's proof I paid my premium. So here was a woman, for whatever reason, her policy ended around February or April of last year. She had to get another policy. So she goes for a short-term policy. She gets a short-term policy. Those short-term policies and travel insurance, where I first started out, they don't cover for pre-X. Even though the ACA is now covering you for
The
pre-X,
Affordable Care Act.
right, the
yeah.
Affordable Care Act, now, when it comes to these short-term policies, which there was another law just passed for 2017 on it, and you're still able to get them, but they're getting smaller and smaller.
I'm not even familiar with a
Yeah,
short-term
right.
policy.
So the short-term policies, they don't cover you for pre-X. There are people right here in this county who thought they were going to save money by getting a short-term policy. They are not covered for the pre-X. They're covered for almost nothing. They go back 20 years ago. This could have been pre-X. We're not covering you for it. So unless you have a new fall, unless you fall down and break your leg with something that just happened now after that policy began, they're covering you for almost nothing. And people are paying premiums on this. So, but the Affordable Care Act, basic, not these short-term policies or travel insurance or catastrophic policies, because catastrophic policies are like the short-term policies. At least you don't have the pre-existing exclusions. Great. Now, the problems that have occurred from this is you have people, right when they're getting sick, they're going out to pick up that policy. Now, of course, you can't do it in the middle of the year. Like right now, it's beyond
Well, that's one of the
January
arguments
31st.
against Obamacare for young people.
Right.
Because they don't buy the insurance until they really get sick, and then
Right.
they don't buy it.
Right, and now people out there are complaining, well, now you're buying it as soon as you get sick. Why didn't you buy it before?
Yeah, it's like the
Yeah.
argument with your house burning down. Avoid the fire insurance until it burns down, then go buy the insurance and say, I want to be compensated for my house that just burned down.
Right.
Right?
So that's one of the issues that are happening,
Well, there's also very, very high deductibles.
Oh, my goodness,
And
let me tell
High
you.
premiums that people complain about.
Right, and that is another big thing, too. A lot of people out there, even if you see an in-network doctor, okay, we can get to out-of-network, too, but I've seen policies, in-network doctor, you have to, and I'll give you another example of this, but you see an in-network doctor, and let's say that bill, let's go back to that $400. You paid the doctor upfront $400. The claim is submitted to the insurance company. They're only going to pay $100. You have your deductible that you have to meet of $12,000. Only $100 is going to go towards that deductible, not the $400. Okay?
Really?
And then you've got to build it up. So you get to a point where now you're
So
going to...
only a part of that bill
That's
goes against the
right.
$12,000.
That's right. Now, if you see there are policies out there where it's in-network, okay, all the doctors are in-network, you might just have a small copay of anywhere, and some of those copays are getting pretty big now. The copays that I see are usually between some are still 15, which is rare. Most of them are between 40 to 60 or 70, and some are even $100.
Really? Wow.
And that's just your deductible. So for you to grow that deductible, and you're paying the high premiums, okay, the premiums are really going up, you got a high deductible, you have some very big co-pays.
Well, my copay, I guess I should feel very pleased from my old corporate insurance coverage. I'm retired now. My
Right.
old corporate, my copay is $8,
That's phenomenal.
which is probably a real rarity nowadays.
Right, that's phenomenal. But let's say, like, okay, I go to the doctor, they were in network, and they're forced to accept the reasonable customary charges. If they're in network, they have to accept the reasonable customary charges. But
Who
still,
establishes reasonable and customary charges?
it originally started with an insurance company.
Is that a mandate by the government for,
Yes, it
The
was,
definition
it was
of that?
first started by an insurance company.
Okay.
They pretty much pushed the insurance company out. Now it's handled through Medicare, Medicaid, and you can go online and look for fee schedules, which is also the reasonable customary charges.
Oh, really?
Yes.
would you have to know the code for a specific?
Yes, you need the procedure code, and then you can look it up online to see in your area how much they normally get paid according to that
So
procedure
that would
code.
be a wise thing for someone to do if they had doubts about their bill, wouldn't it?
Right. So let's say you're planning a surgery. And if it's a planned procedure, New York State passed a bill in April 1st, 2015. It was called the Surprise Bill, April Fool's Day Surprise Bill.
Ah.
The New York State Surprise Bill law, April 1st of 2015.
Okay.
If you have an emergency and you go in the hospital, they can't overcharge you reasonable customary charges, or it's also now considered to be the allowed amount.
That's for the state of New York.
Right. And there are other states that are starting to adopt it, not exactly on the same terms, like California recently adopted it, but they have some major differences of what the New York State law is. And there are other states that are now starting to adopt the bill. Florida adopted it this past year. If it's an emergency and you are responsible for that bill, because let's say your insurance company didn't have a contract with the hospital or the doctor, they can only charge you the reasonable customary charges. If you have a planned procedure, they have to tell you in advance how much that procedure is going to cost you. If it's an out-of-network provider, they have to tell you in advance. You should be receiving it in writing. They have to tell it to you 2 or 3 times.
Do they do that religiously or?
They are
or avoid
supposed
it?
to. They're
Okay.
supposed to. Some of them don't. I'm working on a case right now, which was an emergency. The doctors got paid by 2 insurance companies over $4,000. There were 2 brothers who were the surgeons. One was the primary surgeon, the other one was the assistant surgeon. On that one alone, each doctor is charging this woman $65,000. That's a total of $130,000 for back surgery, which was an emergency. She was put in the hospital immediately. They got paid over $4,000. They want the difference. I just sent that case to the state.
Wow. That's incredible. Getting back to Obamacare,
So,
because of all of the controversy in Washington right
Right.
now over this, with the new the Trump administration, who, they claim they're going to overturn it and so forth. If you were to try to anticipate or fortune tell, how do you think that's going to shake out?
okay, I'm sure you've heard about vouchers on the news.
Yes.
I don't think that, I will be amazed if vouchers happen. I will be absolutely
Why?
amazed.
That seems to be a...
Because it's like, here, I'm giving you some money, or I'm giving you, this amount, and you're going to use as a voucher if you have to go to the doctor or the hospital. Is that going to be enough money to pay those bills that you're going to get from the hospital or the doctor? I'd be scared that the answer's going to be no.
Well, one would think, if done properly, one side of that equation would be balanced against the other side.
Right.
So the charges would somewhat be in line with what the voucher was and vice versa.
Right.
You don't think that'll happen?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what my gut feeling is. And I'm out speaking about this now. Medicare, the Advantage plans, I have worked with people who've been in and out of hospitals 7 times in a year. And with the Advantage plans, the amount of money out of their pocket has been astronomical. And I have been able to get them to go back on the plan with direct Medicare
You
through
mean
the
because of
government.
lack of coverage for specific problems? Or
It's even,
specific
it's lack
ailments?
of coverage, they need pre-authorization, not all of them. You might need pre-authorization, you can only see the doctors in network. You know, I mean, look, Medicare is the same where you see doctors in network, but if you have direct Medicare rather than one of those Advantage plans, you've got a lot more doctors to choose from. You don't even have to, some of the Advantage plans, you have to stay within your state. Like what's offered through the states now, with the Affordable Care Act. You can't go out of state. And a lot of these policies, even with Medicare, you might only be able to go see in-state doctors. But if you have direct Medicare with the government, you can go to any state. It doesn't matter. You just have to
Well,
make
that's
sure.
one of the improvements, I think, that the Republicans are claiming, out-of-state capability for
Right.
purchasing insurance as well as getting service.
Right. I think
Well,
that
that
people
should be a help if that
people
happens.
should have the right to be able to go out
Yeah,
of
of
state.
course.
Right now, that's not, if you get it through the state, you have to stay within the state. And I'm sure
What
that.
if you need a special procedure and the best location for getting that procedure is out of state?
Right. So
You
that's
can't do that.
That's the reason why I think that direct Medicare is the best. Now, what my gut feeling is that the Medicare that's offered, they're going to start, and I've heard of situations where people are becoming 65, and these health insurance companies are putting you right on their own Advantage plan without your consent, and they're trying to put a stop to that. I mean, my gut feeling
You mean
is,
this employer-provided insurance? Is that what you're talking about?
no, it's through Medicare.
Oh, it's through
Through the
Medicare.
Advantage, it's the
Okay.
Advantage plans you can get through Medicare through the commercial insurers. You're about to turn 65. You're going to get letters from AARP or other groups because now you're becoming a senior. So why don't you join this group? Why don't you join this insurance company, right? And now I'm hearing stories where they might have some information about you, and they might not be telling you the correct information on the phone or being honest with you, and you're put right on one of their Advantage plans. And then it's hard to get out of it. And you didn't even know that you're going to be stuck on their Advantage plans as you're turning 65.
Wow. I'll tell you, it's really, really such a confusing process, wending your way through all these things, which 99.9% of people, I'm sure, don't, or don't even have the capability, let alone the time, to get into the nuances of all of this.
Right.
Getting back to your book, which covers a lot of ground in terms of how to sort your way through this type of thing. But for the audience, what would you suggest the average person do in terms of getting proper coverage? So what should I be doing?
Okay, this is what I work for.
I'm going to be going to the doctor going forward, as everyone does, if
Right.
you're still alive,
Right.
hopefully.
Right.
So how should I deal with that whole process?
So now it's
What
going
are
to be
some of the key
this
points?
fall, and you have to decide which insurance company you want for next year. Okay, you have the right to switch. Okay, not that we even have those many available anymore like we used to, but you have the right to switch. So the first thing I tell people, whether they're an individual, I'm also a licensed consultant. I'm a licensed broker and consultant for the state of New York. Again, I've never sold insurance. I've only been on the claims end. But I tell people, when you are making that decision, and as a consultant, I've even worked for companies for them and their employees to give my advice about where I think that they what would be best fit for them. So these are the 3 things you have to look at. Who are your doctors? Which hospital they affiliated with? And if you're on medication, what kind of medication are you on? Now, you're going to call the insurance company, and you're going to say to them, what's being offered to you, you're going to say to the insurance company, if I purchase this policy, am I going to be covered for this hospital, this doctor, and this medication? And you want it in writing. Because when they verbally tell you something, they might have made a mistake. You want it in writing. And that's how you're going to make the decision of which insurance company you want to work with.
I see.
That's the primary. And then you're going to look to see what the deductibles, the co-pays are, how much out of pocket, how they're going to cover you. But the primary thing is, who are your doctors, what hospital they affiliate with, and what medication are you on.
I see.
That is your guide.
Now I have insurance. I've selected an appropriate company based on the criteria you just mentioned. So now I go to the doctor, I go for visits, or I go for procedures, whatever. I end up in the hospital, whatever. I start receiving bills. What should I do as I start getting these bills in my hands?
Well, first of all, make sure, this is a lot of errors that people make. You get explanation of benefits. If you see a payment on there that you're responsible for, don't pay that until you see the bill. You have to see the bill. And that's going to,
Now, are they itemized?
they should be.
Okay.
They should be itemized.
And if they're
you're
not,
you're going to look to
could
see.
you go back to the insurance company?
Absolutely.
And request a more
Absolutely,
itemized list, or more
Because
definitive list?
one of the things I tell people all the time is with the hospitals, when you're in the hospital, you're going to get these bills from all these different doctors. The question is, were all those doctors in your room to see you? So I tell people, I talk about what to do before, during, and after being in a hospital. You're going to the hospital, please have your friend or relative there. Keep note of who comes in and out of that room, what that person does for you, what medications you're taking.
There's a charge every time one of these people walk into the room.
Sometimes they don't walk in the room, you get a charge.
You get a charge anyway.
Right.
I see.
So have them keep track. And then, I tell people also, you're about to leave the hospital, they're asking for money up front? No. You want to see that bill. You want to see what your insurance company paid on it before you're going to do anything. There is a laboratory company out there, and it just happened to me. I took my kids in for lab work recently, their annual. They asked me for my credit card up front. I said to them, I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you my credit card. I want to see the bill, and I want to see the explanation of benefits before I'm going to pay you anything. And that's what you have to
Did
do.
they agree to that?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
I wonder how many people aren't knowledgeable enough to do that, where they pay up front and then have a problem afterwards. I'm sure it's much more difficult to get the reimbursement after the fact than it is to argue up front, such as you did.
Right.
What about reimbursements? Is that difficult to achieve if there's an overpayment?
Yes, it's very hard. But again,
Call up the insurance company and challenge them, I guess.
well, it's usually the doctor who's overpaid, okay? Because sometimes you might have paid and then they were paid by the insurance company, or sometimes they might even gotten money from two insurance companies.
I see.
And then you want to go back to the doctor or the hospital and say, hey, listen, you know what? I found out, and here's proof, that you were overpaid. I would like you to pay the money back. And if they don't, you can report them.
To where? The state? Where would
Yes.
you report?
Department of Insurance,
Have you ever done that? I'm sure you have.
yes.
Are they diligent in pursuing a complaint? How
Yes,
have
yes,
you
they do.
found them?
But I have a case right now where it happened a year ago, and this gentleman wound up in a hospital, out of state. He's had a policy now since the mid-'80s, and they can't find the policy.
They can't find a record of the existence of the policy?
Right,
Is that what you're saying?
right. This has been in the hands of our state now for, I sent it in the end of December, so we're going into about 7 weeks.
So how did he discover that? He went for a medical procedure?
So he was
and then
visiting,
he tried to get coverage for it? Is
He
that-
was visiting his brother from New York into New Jersey, and he wasn't feeling well. New Year's Day, the 1st, wound up in the hospital. He's got a bill for $75,000, the insurance company first paid some and took it back, and now he's requesting $75,000 from him.
And they're denying because they claim that the policy does not exist.
Right. And then on top of it, he's been paying premium now since the mid-'80s.
Well, he must have records of all that.
And wait a minute, and he's got an umbrella policy on top of it. He should be covered for this entire bill.
Yeah. He's made a complaint to the state, I presume?
But
Or you have.
Yeah, we were working on it together. Yeah. We went to the state. I called the state about 2 weeks ago. I said, do you have a case number yet? They said, no, they must be jam-packed up there in Albany.
So the takeaway from the whole discussion, as I gather, is A, you should be very diligent in your dealings with both doctors and insurance companies regarding costs. And secondly, you should pay attention to much of what goes on and gain some degree of knowledge on these issues. Knowledge which I must admit I don't have, and probably most people don't.
The other thing that I want to add this in this
Yeah,
book that
go
we
ahead.
didn't talk about, there are two things.
Okay.
One of them is, if you're paying a lot of money for your prescription, the book is going to give you other ideas about how to get a lesser fee. And the other big thing that's going on, and has been going on now for, I would say, for at least the last 5 to 10 years, is inpatient, outpatient, under observation. And that's a very big issue,
You know, I
which
had a-
is also happening with people who are not seniors.
You know, I had a comment on that. We could briefly touch on
Right.
that.
I think that this is really important to talk about, because this is a major issue where you go in the hospital and you're not covered for the room and board and medication, and then you get this crazy bill in the mail. Or you leave the hospital and you need to go into a rehab or nursing home, and you're not covered because you didn't get your 3 midnights as an inpatient at the hospital. It's been happening with Medicare, but now it's even starting to happen with people under the age of 65 through commercial insurers.
Yeah, I was a little confused in terms of understanding the differences between inpatient, outpatient, and the costs.
Right. So what happens
Can you
is...
talk a little about
Yeah,
that?
here's a gentleman who is about 30 years old, doesn't have any money, lives in New Jersey. They really have very little money in the bank. And he and his wife, they're really very low income. So he went to a hospital in the state of New Jersey, and again, he's only about 30 years old. He leaves the hospital, goes home. All that they covered, and he was there for 1 or 2 nights. The bill was between the hospital and the doctor, that was over $50,000. They only paid him $50.
$50.
Yes, out of the $50,000. So I told him to buy my book
How were they able to deny the balance of that?
because
On what
he was
basis?
considered not to be ill enough to be an inpatient. They had him as an outpatient under observation. It goes according to your condition. In other words, let's say you break a limb, you have pneumonia, you have a slight heart attack, slight stroke. You're going to be an outpatient under observation. You're not going to be considered to be an inpatient. So
Should he have recognized that
he
beforehand?
didn't know. A lot of people have no clue.
Well, that's what I was referring to.
Right,
The
they have
ignorance of all of
no
us.
clue.
Yeah.
So I helped him, and we got almost all of his bills written off. I gave him free information. I told him how to do it. I said, buy the book. It will tell you. I then call me, and I'll give you free information. Can't spend too much time with you, but I'll help you. And he got it all written off. But these are the issues that are coming up with the seniors. You go into the hospital. If you are not an inpatient, first of all, if you don't have 2 midnights as an inpatient, they're not going to pay for the room and board and medication. They'll pay for the doctors, they'll pay for the lab work, you know, they'll pay other expenses like that, maybe pathology, but they're not going to pay for the room and board and medication. And that out of your pocket is a tremendous amount of money,
Sure.
you know? And now it's not just happening to the seniors, but it's happening to younger people also. And it happened to this gentleman. So here's the story. I had dinner with some dear old friends of mine, and the husband was going in for knee surgery. And I said, look, I want to make sure you're an inpatient. He was having the surgery done in New York City. He went in that Friday. He went in Thursday, had the surgery on Friday. Friday night, his wife was told that he was an outpatient under observation. He couldn't go home. He had to be in a rehab. He had plans to be in this rehab. They made him an outpatient. We had 3 conversations the next day on Saturday. I said to her, okay, this is what I want you to do. I told her the steps I want her to take. She calls me back Sunday morning. She says, Adria, I got it switched. He is going to be an inpatient for 3 midnights before he goes into the rehab. I told her the steps to take. She did it. It worked. But there's so many people out there who are taken to the hospital who are not told or informed. They're supposed to inform you now that you are an inpatient. In fact, I printed out this material that I found on the web. Here, and this is national, it's called the Notice Act. Beginning August 6, 2016, the Federal Notice of Observation, Treatment, and Implications for Care Eligibility is called Notice. Notice of Observation,
Yeah.
Treatment, and Implications for Care
The
Eligibility.
word notice is the acronym.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the Notice Act requires hospital to inform patients orally and in writing that they are in observation status, not inpatients, and the consequence of that status. Now they want to pass another bill.
And that's very recent. Yeah.
Right, then they want to pass another bill. It's called the MOON, they're working on it this year.
Moon.
Right, it's Medicare Outpatient Observation Notice. This is another thing that they're working on. And I don't have all the information on that yet. And-
They should
and-
have an acronym, lunacy. I'll have to think that out and come up with an
But the
appropriate
amazing thing is,
application of it.
the amazing thing about all this is it started out with Medicare, but now it's happening to people under the age of 65.
Wow.
This is scary stuff.
Well, we have to wrap up. Adria, it's been a pleasure. It's a
Thank you.
fascinating and somewhat discouraging topic, I must admit. But if anybody out there wants to gain a fairly in-depth knowledge of how to deal with all of this nonsense, I would highly recommend the book. It goes into a lot of what Adria and I discussed in more detail. And thank you all for sitting in. And thank you for attending.
Thank you so much for having
My
me.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We all set?